One of the governor's top priorities was this issue of open enrollment. This is one of those things that it sounds great. Like, who wouldn't want this? But when you start to dig into the details, it becomes unworkable and very expensive. You no longer have neighborhood preference. If you're not at your computer at 11:59 the night before, there's some super mom or super dad across town hitting refresh to get their child in your school. You could be crowded out of your neighborhood school.
Welcome to the East Anchorage Book Club. I'm your host, Andrew Gray. The purpose of this podcast is to tell stories of Alaskans of interest and importance. Today is a special bonus episode about open enrollment. Last week on the podcast, I interviewed the Senate Rules Chair, Bill Wielechowski of East Anchorage, about the upcoming legislative special session starting this Saturday, August 2nd. When I was editing that episode for length, I had cut out some of Senator Wielechowski's comments about Governor Dunleavy's priority of open enrollment, a proposal that, if adopted, would allow any child in Alaska to be educated at any Alaska school. I decided there was value to releasing that critique, and I reached out to Representative Rebecca Himschoot of Sitka, who co-chairs the House Education Committee, for some of her thoughts on open enrollment as well.
You know, one of the governor's top priorities was this issue of open enrollment. And I don't think people understand. I don't think people of Alaska would be very happy if we passed open enrollment, for example. And there's a reason we didn't pass the things that he's suggesting, right? Open enrollment, for example, changes the way you do charter schools from a lottery system to a first come, first serve, which is going to work great for some people. But if you're not sitting there at 11:59 p.m. the night before open enrollment starts, hitting your refresh button, you're not going to get your child in the program that you want. And it doesn't only apply to charter schools, it applies to neighborhood schools. People move into certain neighborhoods because they want to send their kids to a neighborhood school. We've got some great ones in East Anchorage. You know, you can imagine a scenario where maybe your kid, or maybe let's just pick a school in South Anchorage. Let's say South High, for example, or Service High. A lot of parents want to send their kids there. And if you live in that area, you just sort of expect your child is going to go there. But under open enrollment, that's not the case. You no longer have neighborhood preference. If you're not at your computer at 11:59 the night before, there's some super mom or super dad across town hitting refresh to get their child in your school. You could be crowded out of your neighborhood school. You could have
someone who lives across the street from Service High, their kids could end up going to East or Bartlett because too many folks were online at the right moment and they had capacity and you weren't there refreshing your computer. And so your kids end up getting bused pretty far away from home, even though there's a school right across the street that you planned your kids to go to.
Exactly what could happen. And we tried to explain this to the governor's office, that I don't think you fully understand how the implications of what you're trying to do. You know, and the governor in his original proposals for open enrollment had the state paying for this. So, you know, you could have kids coming down from Wasilla to come into Anchorage. Look, we have open enrollment already in every major school district in the state, but it's based on availability. If you live in East Anchorage and you want to send your child to West High, you can do that if it's available, if there's an opening. If you live in Wasilla and you drive into Anchorage every day and you want your child to go to Bartlett High, you can do that. You just have to call up the school district and say, hey, do you have an opening there? And they will gladly take you. And they, to my knowledge, have never rejected anybody. But when you start making this a requirement, you start saying we're going to potentially crowd out kids in the neighborhood. That, I think, is something that most Alaskans would not be very happy with. And by the way, the state has to pay for it.
Right.
You know, so all of a sudden we're paying, I don't know how that works. The state's going to pay the transportation costs for the kids to drive down from Wasilla, or maybe there's a summer school in Nome, for example, and parents in Anchorage want to send their child to go to a summer school up in Nome, and the state's going to pay, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of dollars to start chipping kids, millions of dollars, I would think, to move kids all around the state.
Well, one of my concerns when Anchorage School District is moving toward the academy model about the transportation of kids from one school to another school and having to do some sort of like massive transport system, that you'd have something similar happening with the open enrollment if you've got kids who live near service, but they didn't get into service and they need to go to Bartlett, then the bus system has to provide that. It just seems like it would be a logistical nightmare.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I have no idea how they would make this work in reality. And this is not, this is one of those things that it sounds great. Like, who wouldn't want this? But when you start to dig into the details, it becomes unworkable and very expensive. And this is, again, what we tried to explain to the governor's office. Like, look, we're happy to do open enrollment, but once you start forcing school districts to do it in a way that we know won't work, then that becomes very problematic. And that's not something that we could support in the legislature.
Rebecca Himschoot, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Andrew. Great to be with you.
So let's talk a little bit about open enrollment. You're following Senator Bill Wielechowski, who has just talked about the problems with having a true open enrollment where, every seat is open to every student across the state, and how expensive that could be and what a logistical nightmare the busing of folks could be. But there are actually some other issues with open enrollment. Can you talk about those?
Oh, I just have talked to folks who are in districts that have open enrollment, and there's all kinds of crazy stuff that happens. You have principals of buildings who won't talk about the discipline issues within their building because that's bad advertising. You're not going to fill your seats. You're not going to attract families to your school if you have discipline issues. So it's just like, like La La Land. We're not going to talk about it. Nothing to see here, even though you might have some very serious issues in your school. So I think you lose some transparency because things that we normally want to know about so that we can work on improvement don't get reported because you're gonna lose enrollment if you talk about it. That's one thing. And then there's crazy stuff. You'll get districts that say things like, we have trampolines in our gym and we do trampoline class every Wednesday. Or
right. So that kids will be like, I want to go there because I want to be in the trampoline class.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And so now suddenly they're competing and they're going to start to do gimmicky things like we serve pizza on Friday.
Right. So what we're kind of talking about is like that the students, in this case, sometimes the third and fourth graders, are the customers and they're always right. What makes the third grader happy? Having trampoline class and having Domino's pizza. We're going to have the most trampoline and Domino's pizza of any school in the district so that all the third graders will want to come here. And that way we'll max out our enrollment and max out the amount of money that we receive and ensure that this school stays in business.
And I think another thing to consider is we have to think about our role as legislators. I've heard other legislators say our customer is the parents. We need to make sure the parents are happy. But the customer for us as legislators may or may not be the parent, but it absolutely is the taxpayer. Or in Alaska, we're using public dollars. So our customer is every Alaskan, not just the parents, not just the kids. So
the question is, do all Alaskans want their money to go towards trampolines and pizza or towards instruction in the classroom?
I think that's a fair question. Yeah. I guess I just want to add one thing for perspective. I'm sitting out here in Sitka. Sitka is my biggest town. I have 21 communities. Sitka is the biggest. It has 8,500 people. We have an alternative high school and a regular high school. We have a middle school. And then we have a 2 through 5 elementary and a K-1 elementary. Those are our schools. We don't have 6 elementary schools. So you can mess around all you want there in Anchorage and the Mat-Su with your open enrollment. At the end of the day, my families have one school. They have one school to choose from, and it needs to be excellent. And so all this messing around with a policy that does nothing for my schools is, I'll just call it frustrating. It's frustrating for my constituents. People say all the time, what is going on? Why is it so hard to fund schools? Because they haven't thought about being in a district where they could choose the school with the pizza on Friday. They have one school that they're sending their kid to, and we're starving it. And It's upsetting. It's super upsetting.
Something that I talked about with Senator Wielechowski is that the open enrollment as proposed by Governor Dunleavy, where it's really statewide open enrollment, that essentially kids in Sitka could choose to go to school in Juneau. The parent could just enroll them in the elementary school in Juneau. And And then I think that's where it gets sort of complicated, because I'm not sure that the governor's proposal spells it out. If parents in Sitka decide to send their kid to school in Juneau, does the state provide transportation to
I think you're asking actually a really salient question. What's to say if a Sitka kid wants to go to Juneau that we don't have to pay? Is it once a week we fly them over and then we fly them back? Is it once a semester? Is it daily?
I think for most people who are promoting this, I think they're not thinking about Sitka to Juneau. They're thinking like, I don't know, Eagle River to South Anchorage. And that, although maybe onerous on the school district to provide that sort of busing, wouldn't necessarily be impossible. I think flying a bunch of kids to different schools would be impossible. And on its face, that would just seem absolutely absurd. But I mean,
Andrew, there have been a lot of court cases that have made some very absurd decisions that have fallen on our schools. And because when you have a public school, you accept the public, and the courts have ruled that way multiple times, and sometimes in situations where it places quite a burden on the school district. Also, the intention of a public education system is that the public can be educated.
Rebecca Himschoot, thanks so much for coming back on the show.
Always happy to talk with you, Andrew.
Thank you, listeners. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, rate, and review us. To contact me, email rep.andrew.gray@aklug.gov or call 907-269-0123.